how do you maximize a player's potential without it taking over family life? Because for a lot of families, soccer didn't just get added to the schedule, it became the schedule. And most parents aren't asking the right questions. They're asking, what's the best league? When the real question is, how do I make a good development decision, protect my family time, and not lose control of my own health in the process? This episode, it's about clarity, not noise. So let's get into it. Welcome back to the Uptown Experts podcast. Today's episode is for busy soccer parents who feel like their calendar is run by training, matches, travel, and consistent decision-making. It's also for, I'm going to say, coaches and busy professionals who support families through the process of youth sports and want to help provide a little bit of clarity about the pathways without the confusion. Today's guest is Dr. Richard Bucciarelli. No, Dr. Richard Bucciarelli.
There you go.
Athlete, coach, entrepreneur, and someone who sparked a lot of conversation with his opinions on, I'm going to say, soccer, or as I like to call it, football here in Canada. And we're going to ask, I'm going to say, some questions that people want the answers to. So with all that being said, Rich, because we're friends, I'm going to call you Rich.
That's right. Yeah, you knew me way before I was Dr. Bucciarelli.
That's definitely true. So Rich, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, as am I. And as I was joking around before we got started, I really was going to reach out to you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have everybody knows I have my list on my board, and it says, here's everybody that I want to have on my podcast. And I was getting through them. I'm like, okay, Rich, summer's coming. I got to make sure I say, okay, I want him in around here so we get it. So again, thank you for coming. I really appreciate this, and I'm a big fan. I know, I see what you're doing. I'm a big fan.
You're welcome. And, thank you for having me, man. I'm honored to have fans like you. So that's great. Yeah.
So let's get right into it. For all the people that are going to be listening, here's what I'm going to say. We're going to give Rich 2 minutes to talk about himself as a coach, as an entrepreneur, as an athlete, and how will you pull this all together? So why don't you tell the people who you are and what you do?
Okay, so yeah, and I'll be brief, obviously. So I was a soccer player, an athlete, and I played all throughout university and briefly in the Canadian Professional Soccer League, which it's called professional, but we have to call it a semi-professional league, even though that word is there. I wasn't really good enough to make any money as a player, so it was kind of a natural transition to get into coaching, even though I wasn't making any money as a coach either. But long story short was I was studying kinesiology while I was coaching. And essentially some of the parents of the kids that I was coaching, they saw me doing my own workouts on the field before I would coach or whatever, and they knew that I was studying kinesiology, so they kind of had an idea of my background and maybe that I could help them. Some parents started to offer for me to train their kids, and we're talking, this is actually around the time that you and I met. I was playing for York and all of that, and in university. And so I turned that into a small part-time job, training some soccer players before or after the practices I was coaching at. Okay. Funny enough, I wasn't being paid to coach, but
but you're making more money.
I made some money finally doing it. Then some other teams from the club that I was working with on the neighboring fields, they saw me, and the coaches came up to me and said, "Hey, will you train our team?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll do that." And so by the time I graduated, with an undergraduate degree in kinesiology, I had this little part-time business going, doing fitness training for soccer. And kinesiology is interesting. Eventually, now, I'm a professor now in kinesiology, so I'm talking to hundreds of students that were kind of in my situation.
The young Richards and Richerettes.
Yeah, hundreds of them. And one of the things about that degree is there's a million different directions you can go. You can go to teacher's college, and you can keep going with your education, do a master's, get into research. Some people go into physio, chiropractic, medical school, naturopath, on and on and on. In any case, I didn't want to do any of that. So I had to convince my parents that it was a good idea to continue to do fitness training for soccer. And I kind of figured that since I had a decent amount of success in the short time that I was doing it part-time, I thought, well, if I pour all my energy, all my effort, my whatever knowledge and expertise that I have, if I put everything I have into this, maybe I can be successful at it. And more or less, that's what I tried to do.
So you had the entrepreneurial spirit.
I had it, I think, from the beginning. And
before you even finished school, it sounded like.
100%, yeah, I did. And funny enough that I didn't exactly have everything mapped out perfectly at the time. But I do remember very clearly a conversation I had with one of my dad's best friends, who was a real estate agent.
Okay.
Successful guy, and when he found out that that's what I wanted to do, and just small backstory is my father was a dentist, and I have a twin brother who got into consulting, and so they kind of they were very proud of what he was doing, and what he was doing made sense. Whereas with me, it was sort of like, what do you mean you're going to train soccer players? Like, what is that? That doesn't make it.
And you don't compete with your twin brother.
No, not at all. We're not competitive.
Right?
No, of course not. Twins and same sport, same everything.
Never. It's not competitive.
So I had to sort of convince my parents. But then I remember, and I think probably my dad, he didn't tell me this, but I think he arranged this conversation so that this guy could talk some sense into me. But more or less what he told me was, he said, look, Richard, if this is what you want to do, okay, you're passionate about it. And, the way I saw it was I was kind of combining what I really was passionate about, which was soccer and fitness. And I called my company Soccer Fitness for that reason. He says, if this is what you want to do, then, you have to think about what it is that you can do in order to be the best at it.
Good advice.
And he didn't give me any much more detail other than that, but he said, think about everything that you would need to do in order to be considered the best, in order to be considered an expert in it. And I took that advice to heart. And so I remember very clearly, it was maybe a month or two after I had graduated, that I kind of came up, I called them buckets, but think of them as categories. And I thought, well, okay, these are the different categories in my career that I would need to excel in to be considered the best, as you said. Again, I didn't have everything mapped out, and I wasn't clear about everything at the time. But for example, one category was, well, I needed credibility that I figured would only come from working in soccer at the higher levels. So the only avenue that was open to me at the time was being an assistant coach for free at York University, because I was a player there and I had a good relationship with the coaches there. And so, that was it. And I figured eventually maybe I'll get to other higher levels, professional, national team, whatever. So that was one category. Another category was education. And I had the bachelor's degree, but I kind of looked at what are the different certificates, like professional courses and things I can take. Eventually I figured probably that I would do a master's and a PhD, and it was a long way down the road that I got to do those things, but that was also on the list. So the education was a bucket. On and on from there, having my own facility was a bucket. Part of credibility wasn't just working at a high level, but I figured I needed to write articles and get things published. And so funny enough, that later that year was when I reached out to Inside Soccer magazine. I pestered the editor with 3, 4, 5 emails. I think he didn't respond. Finally, then he literally responded to me. He says, "Wow, Richard, you're really persistent."
Yes.
I ended up by within a year or so after that, I had one article in every one of their magazines for, I think it was about 8 years. Every one of those buckets, and I've only given you a few of them, there were others. I sort of figured, well, what this gentleman told me was good advice. It's clearly a really unconventional career, so I might as well try to be the best I possibly can at it, and that's what I did. And it's been a long road from there to now. I can just maybe say what I'm doing now, and that way, we can get on with it. But so I do have my own business, which includes my own facility. It's a 4,000 square foot space, which you know very well, a training center where we do training and testing and other diagnostics, plus an integrated clinic with physiotherapy, massage therapy, and other clinical services, which I run and manage. I'm a professor in the Faculty of Kinesiology as a sessional lecturer, basically at the University of Guelph Humber. My PhD, which I eventually completed, was a long road to get there, but that was at Guelph. And so Guelph has this other campus at Humber College. So I do teach, and I also teach at the college as well in fitness and health promotion.
I lost count. How many is that?
It's a lot. Yeah. I'm involved in several different research projects. Some of them were through the PhD, and eventually I branched out into some other research in sports science specific to soccer. And along with all of that, I am also still, I guess, in and out, but chasing this dream, I would say, of working in the highest levels of soccer. So I have worked both with the Canadian national teams, so at the international level.
Wow.
I've worked in many different professional clubs. We can maybe get into what those clubs are, or which clubs and what leagues and all of that. And that's also taken me, not just kind of to the professional clubs in Canada, but also in other countries.
Wow.
And I'm when I say chasing a dream, that's the best way to explain it, because it seems sometimes off, very far away. Off in the distance, and I've kind of made it happen here and there, but it's fleeting, and I'm still trying to make that happen again. And,
Well, it sounds like you've accomplished quite a bit.
I'm trying, man.
Right?
I'm managing all those things, and then I should say I'm happily married. Surprisingly, with all of this going on, she's stuck with me, and in fact, funny enough, I came to learn later, because you and I met when we were very young, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But it turns out at the time that my eventual wife was your friend from high school. You knew her even before I did, and I guess it's funny that I can say this too, that she was at York University studying while we were there. I never met her. Funny enough, we probably crossed paths a few times. She probably didn't like me. She thought I was a jock or something. But we have that connection there. And I do have 3 beautiful children as well, who are all very young. And any spare time I have, anyone asks me, like, what are your hobbies? What do you do in your spare time? I don't have any.
There is no spare time.
I work, and whatever spare time I have is with my family. So.
And that's the way it should be.
Right. Yeah.
And first of all, I may have found someone that does more, if not the same, if not more than what I do. I don't know. We're gonna have to count those out, okay? Just to be clear. But to be, honest, it's part of the reasons why I really wanted you here, right? Like, you've seen so many sides to the game, from young student athlete to working in the business as a coach, working in the business as, soccer fitness. And like you said, seeing so many different sides to the game. That's real knowledge that we got to pull out of you. And I'm going to try to make sure I ask as many questions as I can, so that we can give the audience the answers, the answers they're really looking for. So let's dive in. But let's start with the parents' problem first, okay? Why does youth soccer create chaos for the family?
The problem that I see, and I'm going to speak about Canada and Ontario, because there's different problems in different places, but I know this very well. I think what's happened is that from 20 or 30 years ago, which would have been the age that you and I were playing and growing up, and we lived it, probably at that time there were some flaws, primarily that you had a lot of coaches, most teams, even the best teams, it was typically somebody's father on the team that was coaching, and maybe some of those were good and competent, but not all of them were. Perhaps they were also a little bit too much on the kind of the yelling and screaming on the sidelines, and not just the coaches, but the parents. And so it's almost as though, like, okay, there were some challenges, and there was a provincial program, and there was a pathway, there was scouting and identification, but I don't think that all of the talented players were really given a fair chance. There was a lot of politics, and
I think there's more politics than there are chance.
Yeah. So and I mean, I'm being brief here, but there were some challenges and some flaws in the kind of the way the system worked back then, and also there were really limited opportunities. I mean, basically there was this brief period of time where Toronto had a professional team called the Toronto Blizzard, and the old, was an NASL and then a CSL league. And by the time we came up, that team didn't exist anymore. Exactly. And then there was the Toronto Lynx, in the A League. And so there were sort of these really, really like small and difficult to attain professional soccer opportunities in Canada. And if you were talented, I don't think I was good enough, but lots of people that I played with were, and who these guys are. And you had to leave, and again, it wasn't like the way it is now, where you could leave and there's places that will take care of you, that will, you have to pay for it, but at least
there's an option.
You get an opportunity there, and whereas back in the day, you would just get on a plane and go to Italy or go to Portugal or somewhere, and they, they would
kick you out
the door, and here, good luck. So anyway, flaws in the system the way they were, and the people in charge ostensibly are making it seem as though the new system that has been created was created simply to address those flaws. And if you were to look at it like from a helicopter view without getting into the details, it might almost make sense that you would say, well, too many parent volunteer coaches. Well, okay, let's have paid coaches. Scouting was not really centralized and lots of people didn't get a fair chance. Well, let's try to centralize it. Maybe players weren't training enough and too many games, too many tournaments, although I don't all agree with all that, but that was a message that was put out there as a flaw in the system. And so let's try to standardize the number of practices, the number of games. Listen, those things all sound good, don't they?
Yeah.
Again, from the helicopter,
from
they
5,000
look great.
feet, yeah.
Okay, and when you go down, lower, closer, okay, in fact, what you see is that the changes that were made to the system, perhaps you could say some of them were a little bit successful in addressing some of those flaws, but I would argue that the cure has been worse than the disease. There's been a lot of, as an example, a flaw, you can call it that, which was lack of so-called, I'm just doing air quotes. I don't want to do that too much, but it's just because it's like these words that are put out there, but they don't mean what we think they mean or what we're being told that they mean. Standards. Lack of standards with regards to coaching, education and qualifications and all that. So the proposed solution was, okay, well, we'll just make it mandatory that everybody gets the used to be Ontario Provincial B license, now Canadian B license. Oh, and by the way, now it's called CONCACAF B license. And who knows what it's going to be called in 2 or 3 years. And again, from the helicopter view, that sounds great because it's a standard, quote unquote. But in reality, the license is just about worthless because the licenses or any level of education you get, we've both been to university, I'm teaching in university, I know how it is. Your educational credentials are valuable because of the quality and the knowledge and the expertise and the competence of the people who teach you. The instructors and the professors or whoever they are.
Exactly.
And in the Canadian licensing system, the instructors are all incompetent. And so the problem there is that you get, again, this so-called standard, which from a helicopter view looks great and looks like there's been this very effective change that's been made. Now all the players are getting a higher standard of coaching. And when you zoom in, you see that, well, no, in fact, they're not. They're getting a worthless coaching license, which is delivered by people who literally have never coached before, okay? And on top of it, a lot of the, again, because the competence of the instructors is so low, of course the instruction that they get, the guidelines that they get coming out of it, the way they run their training sessions, all of it are also of a very low quality. And so I can go on, but I think, because you said, I think your question was, use the word chaos. So I think the problem is that, okay, we now have a system where the cure is worse than the disease. I guess I would say that the biggest problem, because there's lots of problems, but the biggest problem is that whereas in our generation or in previous generations, soccer was affordable for everybody.
Yes.
Okay. You could always invest more in gym memberships, in private trainers, in other coaching, and lots of teams would do that, and some players would do that if they could afford it. But the league, okay, from which all of the identification into the provincial program happened, was called the OYSL.
Yes,
okay?
it was.
It was relatively cheap. It was affordable for everyone, and I know for a fact, because I played on a pretty good team in that league, and I know you did too, that there were players that literally couldn't afford it, but the club took care of them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so since that league was affordable, and since there was also promotion and relegation into and out of the league, the better teams with the better players and the more talented players would be in it. And there was, some standards and some accountability. Promotion meaning if you won in the lower league, you would get bumped up.
Yes.
And if you lost in the league, you would get relegated down.
Makes sense.
Okay. And for that reason, everybody involved, the players, the coaches, even the people in the provincial program and all of it that were doing the identification, if you had talked to them at that time, and I would go all the way up until, the 2010s, that's when I was a fitness coach in Ontario soccer and with the Canadian women's national teams.
So you were in the system.
I was in it. Yeah.
This isn't an outsider having an opinion.
Yeah, all and you know, full disclosure, all of the you know, the let's say the points of criticism or whatever that I make about Canadian soccer, I've lived it. Mm-hmm. I've literally lived it at every level. I've seen it, and so I'm not speaking about theory or something I read in a book or whatever. I'm speaking about my own personal experiences of what I've seen. So even up to, again, the 2010s, everybody involved in the OYSL would have freely admitted that almost all of the most talented players are there.
Mm-hmm. In the previous OYSL.
That's what we're talking about. Yeah, because more or less that league you know, folded and could not exist anymore once they created OPDL.
Exactly.
And that's, I have to use air quotes, Player Development League. Okay, we'll get into it, right? But that league, the OYSL, the previous league, everyone acknowledged and it was true that all the most talented players were there. And so since the identification into the provincial program, the national teams was done by scouting through that league, that was a fair and equitable way to ensure that you got most of the most talented players into the higher level pathways.
Well, that makes sense. If like, I'm just rehashing, you know, kind of what you said. Yeah. And what you're telling me is you had a league that had all of the best teams with all of the best players.
That's right.
And if you were a player that was on a team that got demoted, you probably left and went to one of the teams that was still in the league and went through a tryout, so you stayed. Yep. So eventually, over a course of period of time, you had all the best players in the best league.
And when I say everyone involved acknowledged it, I mean everyone. I mean even the people who are still working with Ontario soccer now, who will look you in the eyes and tell you with a straight face, oh, no, that league didn't work. You know, we had a hard time scouting and identifying players, but now the OPDL, that's what has the best of the best. They'll tell you that with a straight face when I guarantee a lot of them, and I mean, in fact, I'm sorry, I digress, but I want to make these points that the fact that there are still people in leadership positions in Ontario soccer now in 2026 who were in those leadership positions in like 2006. So for 20 years, I mean, that should tell you something about standards and accountability. But in any case, if you were to talk to those people now, they would tell you the OPDL has the best of the best and it's a much better system. But they will have told you back then that the system worked fine. And you know what? It did. And I'll give you just one example to show that by the early 2000s, that it was and when I say it, that the OYSL leading into the Ontario provincial program was the best system for identifying talented players and then developing them and letting them progress to the higher levels, whatever they were capable of and reaching their full potential, the best we ever had in Canada. Here's why. Eventually, the provincial program became the following. It became a program that started in October and went all the way through to the end of May, 8 months. Run at the Ontario Soccer Centre, which had a decent turf field, full size. And everybody in the provincial program, they were identified from the OYSL, which again had basically all of the best players.
Making sense.
And then from that point, the provincial program, these players would train from under 14 to under 17 boys and girls, 4 teams by each sex, okay? They trained 4 days per week, 2 hours per session with some of the best coaches. I won't just say in Ontario, I'll say in Canada. And I will list a few names just because these are people that you know, and probably some people that watch this might know. Joey Lombardi, Patrick Tobo, okay? Rest in peace, Joey Nucifora, okay? Those are just a few, but there's others, okay? Very good coaching, 4 days a week. They also had 2 days a week of a customized and comprehensive strength and conditioning program. I was one of the people that worked there. The full-time person that delivered that strength and conditioning program, I don't know if you know this name, Paolo Paccione. So he's a good friend and colleague of mine. He was a real mentor to me and a pioneer in fitness and strength and conditioning for soccer in Ontario and Canada. He ended up, like I did, but a long time before me, getting very frustrated by the lack of opportunities and the way he was being treated in Ontario. He worked with the Montreal Impact. He then worked with the Miami FC in the NASL. And through some of the contacts that he made in those environments, he ended up actually landing himself a position in the top club in North America called Club America in Mexico. He's been a strength and conditioning coach at that level for almost 15 years now.
Wow.
Now he's in Chile with the top club in Chile called Colo Colo. Okay, so he's had a very successful international professional soccer career, and he's from Toronto. He went to York University. He was in the same kinesiology classes as I was.
So what happened?
What happened with him? As I said, it's not the same as me. It's not parallel to me, but the outcome is the same. Is good, competent, knowledgeable, and capable coaches, fitness coaches, or anyone else that work in the game here, they don't last. The leadership in Ontario soccer, the leadership in Canada soccer, all the people that have the power to make decisions about who gets hired, who gets put where, and also that make the curriculum and leadership. Let's just use that because, there's a lot of times they'll have these arbitrary titles that, like, director of development or chief technical officer. Like, these titles don't mean anything because, it's not like there's like a standard list of job competencies or whatever that they're held accountable to. They just get that title and they get a salary raise. And of course the money comes from taxpayers. And so it's a corrupted system. But in any case, the leadership are literally all incompetent. And so incompetent leaders will not hire competent people. And even if somehow a competent person somehow makes his way or her way into that organization, those competent people won't last. They'll get fired, or they'll get, pushed out in some way, or they'll just get so frustrated by things that they leave. So, I know for a fact that that's what happened to him. It's exactly what happened to me. Okay. And so, in any case, back to the provincial program, just because, yes, I want to just tell you that program, okay, again, by the late 2000s, so let's say by 2007, 2008, we had the best players in Ontario, and by proxy, the best in Canada. A lot of them, there were good ones in Quebec and BC and all over, but Ontario was very good. And they were training 6 days per week, 4 days training on field, 2 days comprehensive strength and conditioning for 8 months, free.
That's amazing.
Free.
Okay. And this is over and above the club workload that they were doing.
When they finished at the end of May, then they would go back to their clubs in the OYSL, which wasn't free but was cheap, affordable, and they would play. And again, it was like, okay, fine, maybe you have somebody's father coaching you. It's not the best here and there, but they played, and they had, and those games were meaningful. They were, again, there was the Ontario Cup, which was like an important tournament, and the scouts would go there, and all the college coaches would be there. Yeah. And again, I was in it, by 2010 was when I got involved as the fitness coach with the under 17 women's national team. So at that point, I was there all the time. They had an NTC, a national training center, and I was there at the provincial training and testing. And you'd see coaches from Duke, from Penn State, from that they were all there. Professional coaches, even on the female side, would come and watch. I mean, it was the best player development program and system to identify and develop and get the most out of players that we've ever had. And incompetent and corrupt leadership at the top, I think, saw that there were some private academies that had popped up. A and B is one of them that we know very well. There were some other ones that were charging higher fees for actual professional coaching, not with a Canadian license, but with people that were trained and educated in either the United States with their licenses or in Europe, or UEFA licenses. Okay, and offering a more standardized competition structure, pathways to Europe, etc. These were just sort of starting around 06, 07, 08. I think the incompetent and corrupt leadership at Ontario Soccer and Canada Soccer saw what was happening there and figured, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. We need to create our own so-called standards-based program so that we can work with the clubs, with the non-profit clubs, and okay, right? So yeah, I know I can see by the way you roll your eyes that you know what that means, okay? But in any case, they work with the clubs, and now all of a sudden, a few years later, you got the player development league run by amateur, non-profit clubs, most of whom are also incompetent and corrupt, okay? Charging similar fees to what the academies were charging. And all of a sudden now, because Ontario Soccer and Canada Soccer have the authority and the power and the control, well, now what they do is they gatekeep the access into the provincial program and into the youth national teams and eventually the actual national team. And then eventually also, once TFC Academy and the other MLS academies popped up, they also can gatekeep access into those academies. What I mean by gatekeeping is that essentially the provincial association makes it mandatory for players who wish to be part of that so-called pathway, the provincial program, who want to be identified into the provincial program, well, they have to be in the player development league because that's where all the identification happens.
Yes.
Now, they don't exactly say it that way. They couch their language in these kind of obscure phrases. Like, for example, they'll say, well, access to the provincial program is open to everyone. They say that.
Yes.
But what they don't tell you is that if you're not in the OPDL, yeah, it's open to you, but you got to pay $75 to attend a one-day trial. And, you know, surprise, surprise, barely anyone even looks at you. The coaches are just on their phones all the time during the identification process. And, you know, but it's accessible and open to everyone. Yeah. Okay. So they gatekeep. Okay. And that is, by definition, makes it impossible that all of the most talented players can be actually identified because, of course, they're forcing and, you know, de facto coercing players into that league. Well, what happens if people don't want to be in that league?
So what happens?
They get excluded.
But you have so many other players, talented players.
I would argue that of the talented players that don't get identified because they're not in that program, you can almost break them into subcategories. You have some that literally can't afford it. Okay.
Agreed.
And why? Because the costs have skyrocketed. Now the OPDL costs are somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000 per year. Okay. And then of course there's other costs on top of that for traveling and showcases and all of it. So imagine that people are paying at a minimum $5,000 per year and perhaps at a maximum closer to 15.
Yeah.
There's some that literally cannot afford it.
Well, I mean, as a parent, like I'm on the parent side as well. You know, I have 3 boys that they're actively playing at the, you know, what I'm high level here in Ontario.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were playing for OPDL. I don't even remember what it is, something like $4,000 to $5,000. That's just to the club, right?
Yeah.
And then you're traveling to Ottawa or, you know, whoever, Montreal or Quebec. Pardon me, I guess Montreal is in Quebec, right? But, you know, wherever it is, geography is not my strong suit, right? So, but wherever it might be, and, you know, that's an incurred cost because you got to stay overnight, 1 day or 2 days, and then forget about it if you're traveling for a tournament, like then you're talking about another couple $100. By the time you're done, you're definitely at $10,000.
Right. And so, again, you know, so you got that category of players that can't afford it. And then you have, I would argue, probably an even larger category of talented players who just don't want to do it. They don't see the value in it. And the funny part about all of this is, well, I'll say part of it is funny. Part of it is, you know, it would be funny if it wasn't like unethical or probably should be illegal. But one of the things is that, okay, because the so-called standards in the Player Development League are so low, okay? Again, even the person who's in charge of the entire province of Ontario, the person with the title Chief Technical Officer, this is someone who's never coached, okay? He's coached only a few years at just some random amateur club, okay? From there, somehow he ended up getting his way into a position as a coach educator with Ontario Soccer, teaching like little, you know, kind of the lower level courses. And then, of course, because he's not competent, he goes up the ladder, he becomes manager of coach development. And then, as if that wasn't enough, again, remember, never coached, never played at any level at all other than at the club. Like didn't play in college, nothing. So he's got no playing background, no coaching background to speak of at all. Manager of coach development, then director of development, and now again, I guess a bump in title that comes probably with a bump in salary because, you know, now you're a C level chief technical officer. Okay.
Oh, wow.
We have someone in Ontario with the title of Chief Technical Officer. This is the person that is in charge of everything, of developing the curriculum for coaching education, of enforcing all of the so-called standards for the high performance pathway, teaching in the coaching courses, again, administering the game at every level, and is completely incompetent. Okay, that type of job, like Chief Technical Officer, if you went to Europe, if you went to Portugal, if you went to Italy, if you went to Croatia, if you went to anywhere, you can go to South America, Argentina, whatever. Somebody with that job would be literally one of the experts, one of the best coaches in the entire country. It would be somebody probably wouldn't even get the job until he or she were in their 50s. They would have probably had several decades of experience coaching at the highest level, professional, national teams, and also a track record of success. Okay? Like actually having developed players and won championships. And okay? Those should be the criteria.
I mean, I'm afraid to say I agree with you, because isn't that what it is?
If you use logic and common sense, you would say, well, there's no way that someone should get a position of leadership like that in an organization which isn't corrupt, right?
Yeah.
If they're not competent, if they don't meet those standards.
I would say yes.
Right, but this person does. And so again, I go back to, well, what is it that's so funny and almost ironic about, you know, the player development league and all that? The reason that so many talented players don't even want to be a part of it is because they've recognized that the standards are so low that they're basically meaningless. And even the standards that they do have aren't enforced. And some that are decent standards, I mean, who came up with them? An incompetent person that has no business being there in the first place. So, okay, you have talented players that can't afford it. They're out. They have no recourse here. Okay, that's a significant barrier. Now you have lots of talented players that maybe could afford it, but don't see the value in it and just, you know, bypass it altogether. And still, what do you hear from the leadership? What do you hear in these videos and interviews that they put out? They say the OPDL has the best of the best. The most talented players in Ontario play in that league. That's the pathway to get to the, you know, provincial team, national team, Toronto FC Academy, etc. Okay, and so it's a complete lie. It's a complete scam. And as if all of that weren't bad enough, here's the worst part about it: Ontario Soccer and all of the other provincial associations in the provinces that they're in, not only are they gatekeeping and coercing people into their league, they get 10% of the registration revenue from every single player that goes into the league. Okay, so roughly speaking, we're talking when the registration fees are $4,000 to $5,000. That means Ontario Soccer gets $400 to $500 from every single registration into their player development league, which they coerce players into registering for.
Wow.
Now, isn't that a conflict of interest?
I mean, I didn't know that, but it sounds like it.
Sure. I would say at best, it's unethical. And again, it's like no one wants to call it out. I mean, I'm happy to call it out because, you know, I had my falling out with those guys and I quit. So they, you know, they can't hurt me. Okay. You know, I've already withdrawn myself from any possibility of working with them. But I don't want to work with them because they're incompetent. Sorry,
it's okay.
I'm a bit of a hand talker. I don't want to work with them because they're incompetent. But the parents of the players that are involved in the system, who recognize that there's a conflict of interest, who recognize that gatekeeping is unethical, and who have clearly seen that these aren't all the best players in this league. What are you guys talking about? Some of them, you know, they participate in it anyway because they feel like they have no other choice.
But what else do you do?
Right. And they are afraid to call it out because they know that if they do call it out, well, they're going to get punished. They're going to get denied opportunities. The coaches, since I've started speaking out, honestly, it's hundreds of them have reached out to me, thanking me privately. Okay. Almost none of them will say anything publicly. And okay, I get it. I don't like the fact that more people don't speak out, but I understand why. Because they're coaching in that system and they need the job.
Well, people need to make money.
Yeah, they know they're going to lose their job if they speak out, and they're going to get denied opportunities. Just like, as I said, I mean, I wasn't even denied opportunities. I willingly withdrew myself from any potential opportunity with them, because when I started speaking out, just so you know, and you know, it's fine, you know, people seem to question this sometimes. At the time that I started speaking out, it was because I had had enough of the let's say the incompetent leadership that was telling me things and promising me things and then backing away from the things that they promised me. They were, I would go to meetings and they would ask me for advice. What should we do with this, with fitness testing, with measuring growth development, blah, blah, blah. I would give my best expertise, my best advice, everything to them. And then they would tell me things like, yeah, but Richard, the truth is nobody cares about these fitness tests and it's just a formality, don't worry about it. So it was all, it became clear to me that it was all a big facade. Okay. I could see very clearly that the people I'm talking to, like these people have no idea what they're doing. They have no business being in these leadership positions, and still somehow they are. And then on top of that, there was a falling out that I had because this person in question, this chief technical officer, okay, at one point threatened to steal my intellectual property, which was a content for a coach education course that I developed. I developed the course because I was a coach educator in Ontario soccer and Canada soccer, and I saw, here's another thing about standards, I saw that you could get all the way through to your A license, the highest license we have in Canada, okay, and know literally nothing about fitness or sports science in any capacity. Nothing about warm-ups, nothing about injury prevention, nothing about periodization or load management, nothing about how to actually develop and build fitness, nothing about sex differences between boys and girls, nothing about age-appropriate physical development, nothing. And remember, the people that get the B and the A licenses, well, those are the people that end up becoming technical directors. They end up becoming head coaches at universities. They get all the top jobs, as they should, because the A license is the top license. But they have no knowledge or competence about fitness or sports science. And so remember, and if you've got your kids in the system, you have to understand this. Whatever, physical fitness or physical development standard, so-called, that you're getting, which is coming down from Canada soccer and Ontario soccer, is a complete lie. Okay,
well, we do a ton on our own.
If you find someone on your own and you do it on your own, that's fine. But what I'm saying is that the people who build the curriculum, the ones who educate the coaches, and again, coaches are the only ones. Clubs don't have full-time fitness coaches working, 3-4 practices a week. So it's the coaches that are responsible for physical development.
True.
They have no idea what they're doing.
Well, where are they learning it from?
Right? Unless they get something on their own. They're not getting it from Canada Soccer and Ontario Soccer, nor do the technical directors or the leaders have any idea. So it's like a complete gap in coach education. That's why I created my course.
Makes sense.
Which I didn't want anyone to be confused. I called it the Soccer Fitness Trainers course. It was literally, okay. I taught it on my own for a few years. Eventually, it was a handshake agreement with previous people at Ontario Soccer who were my friends. And then eventually, this incompetent guy steps into the role of manager of coach development. And this guy told me that, well, you know what? I see you teaching coach clinics here and there, teaching coaches about fitness. You can't do that at the same time that you're teaching the course with Ontario Soccer. It's a conflict of interest.
Okay, conflict of interest.
And I thought about it and I said, well, hold on. I never signed a contract with Ontario Soccer. They never paid me to develop this content. The content is my intellectual property. These guys, they're not paying me a full-time salary. They're not, they're just paying me for a course if and when it sells. Who are you to tell me that I can't go and teach another club about anything, about periodization or whatever? That's how I make my living. You want to, control me and tell me that I can only teach with you? That's fine. You can pay me, a full-time 6-figure salary, and then I won't need to go and hustle and do all these other courses. But until then, my intellectual property is mine. Well, I guess he didn't like that, because then he came right out and said it. If you keep teaching these courses, we will not employ you anymore. And by the way, the content of the course is not your intellectual property.
So they challenged you
in writing.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And, I really didn't like that very much. So I decided to get a good intellectual property lawyer. We sent them a letter threatening to sue them. And, it's a long story short, but basically that led to meetings with higher up people where they tried to weasel their way out of it. Okay, they basically just told me, yeah, Richard, sorry, but I hope you don't think that was a threat. And I said, well, no, this was a threat, because look, this is what it says. This doesn't belong to you. It's not your intellectual property. What does that mean other than, all right? What does it mean when you say, if you do this, we won't employ you anymore, if not a threat? They lied. They tried to weasel their way out of it. They even told me, you know what, but you have your course. We're going to make our own fitness course, and you can apply to teach it if you want to. Imagine that, eh? So, okay, I'm the expert. I'm the one that's been there, longer than these guys, okay? Remember, I've been in the provincial program as a fitness coach since 2008, running testing programs and stuff. This is now 2022.
Oh, wow.
This is when the meeting happened. This is when, my falling out happened, okay? So I'm the one that developed my expertise in this area more than anyone else in Canada. It isn't even close. There isn't anyone, okay, that's done even a fraction of what I've been able to do. I'm the one that invented my own course. And because previous people were friends and whatever with me, I didn't even think to do a contract about it, because there wasn't any reason to think. They knew that I was teaching stuff on my own. They knew what my business was. So I've got all this, and you're going to tell me now you're going to develop your own course and I can apply to teach it? So I said, okay, look, guys, like if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But you're not calling your course Soccer Fitness, and you're not using anything that I have used or anything in any of my courses or meetings with you guys or discussions or anything. That's mine. And, I guess they didn't like that I kind of, told them that they couldn't call their course Soccer Fitness because that's my course. And I don't know if you want to say that led to, me quitting or me being fired or
parting ways.
There was a few like little things that were said back and forth, but after that, I didn't work for them anymore. And,
definitely parted ways.
And then of course this incompetent person, this manager of coach development who instigated this whole thing for no reason. 2 months later, this person gets promoted to director of development of Ontario Soccer.
Oh.
So that's what happens, right? Incompetent people that make bad decisions, that cut out competent people because they see competent people as a threat, okay? Those people in a corrupt organization, those people fail upwards. Huh. They get promoted and they get rewarded for their incompetence.
Wow.
Okay? That's what happens in a corrupt system. So those are the people that are setting the standards, okay? And on top of everything, as I said, I had my falling out. I started speaking out against it, but I want to be clear. I don't have a problem that soccer is expensive in and of itself, because ultimately, if you have some more disposable income as a parent and you want to invest in professional coaching, in fitness, in all of it, go for it. It is ironic because a lot of, even in our business, we train a lot of soccer players. Probably 50-60% of the soccer players that we train, they're in the OPDL. So why are they coming to me for supplemental fitness training when they're already in the best of the best in the high performance league? Because the fitness, so-called, that they're getting in these programs is a scam. It's no good. The quality is very poor. And in fact, also, sometimes you'll be in a program like that and you'll be told you're going to get a fitness test and you don't get one. You're going to be told you're going to get a professional fitness coach and fitness training and you don't get it. Nobody enforces the standards. So,
But isn't it part of it to do fitness once a week?
Yes, it's supposed to be part of the so-called standard, but never. I was involved directly in it. Okay, I worked with of that whole OPDL, I've worked with about 14 of the clubs. Okay, from since the time since its inception. Okay. And never, ever did anybody from Ontario Soccer come to look at any of the testing that was done. Nobody looked at the testing data. Nobody checked, other than that the clubs at the end of the year had to fill in a form that indicated and ticked a box, literally, that said, yes, we have a fitness program.
So the fitness training that the coaches do, you're telling me is supposed to be standardized. It is mandated. It's supposed to be standardized, but is left to the coach to actually implement. It's
completely left up to the coach and the club. It's their prerogative. And I'm not going to say that nobody's doing it or whatever, but what they are doing, whatever club is doing whatever they're doing it because they've recognized that it's important, or because the individual team decided to go and find a fitness coach or whatever. It's not top down, and it's not being enforced. It's not being standardized. It's not being regulated. And I would argue it's impossible for Canada Soccer or Ontario Soccer to enforce those standards because they don't have anybody that even understands fitness or sports science to begin with. They're all incompetent.
So let me
ask you this. It's the blind leading the blind. That's what it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What are parents actually buying when they're paying thousands of dollars for youth sport? Or should I say, what are they actually trying to buy?
I think, again, the problem is gatekeeping, right? Because if you have coercion and if you have the association essentially making people feel like they have to register for this expensive OPDL program, well, now there's no incentive and there's no real accountability for anyone involved in the OPDL program to actually put quality in place. Okay, a private business that's uncorrupted, I'll use mine as an example. Now we do only fitness training, but what happens to us if we don't provide something that people actually think is valuable?
Well, people stop coming.
That's right. We directly lose revenue. We cannot possibly stay in business if we don't provide quality.
Correct.
But if I had the big, wealthy provincial soccer association telling everybody, again, you don't have to, but if you want to be in the provincial program, you're going to have to go train with speed training. Well, now what? Well, now I have this guaranteed source of revenue from these people that are being coerced. Do I have the same incentive in that case to provide quality? No, it's gone. And on top of that, of course, these, again, that's why I said nonprofit clubs. Well, nonprofit clubs, I mean, that's an interesting term, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so on their balance sheet at the end of the year, they don't have a profit. But if they get like hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, let's say, in extra revenue that comes from these programs, well, don't they get to give all their employees a higher salary? Don't they get to hire more coaches? I mean, that money, the balance sheet has to read zero at the end of the year. So, and on top of that, those clubs, because they're nonprofit, well, they have government grants as well. And they also have a huge house league. So there's all this money coming in with no accountability. I would argue they're the wrong people to be implementing the standards because they're not a private business that is accountable. In a private business, you eat what you kill.
Yeah.
Okay?
Very, very
That's
true.
it. So in any case, back to what's the problem here with parents? What are they paying for? Well, they're paying for a subpar quality service because it's being gatekept. And so if they happen to get a good coach, great, they got a good coach. If they happen to get, as I said, a team or club that wants to invest some money in fitness, great, they're getting that. But it isn't optimized for those reasons. And so again, this is why I say it's kind of ironic, because you have the so-called best of the best and the so-called league where all the best players are, where they're getting all the best training and the highest standard of coaching and all of that. But yet, all of those players in that OPDL, well, they do supplemental fitness training that they pay extra for.
But
all of them, they do supplemental technical training with final third and a touch of class and all these other, so if the coaching, the training, the fitness is really highest standard, highest quality, well, why are all these people investing in all these other things?
Well, I mean, what's the alternative?
The alternative is you accept this subpar standard, which is a subpar standard, and 2-3 years down the road, your kids are going to be left behind because they're not developing at the same rate as everyone else is doing all that extra work.
But that's the reality.
Right.
Because, I mean, look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I have boys that are playing in the leagues today, and I mean, this. Outside of their regular training schedule, they see a fitness trainer, strength and conditioning twice a week. Yep. They do running training, as you know. Yep. They are doing, on-field stuff, again, at least 2 separate days a week outside of their regular schedules, right? Regular team schedule. And I don't think necessarily that like the clubs or the teams or whatever, that they have to be the ones that provide all of that extra expertise, because it may not be feasible. And, but again, all I'm saying is that, like, imagine just a thought experiment. If you eliminated the gatekeeping, okay, and you went back to just the OYSL model, meaning that you have a league with promotion and relegation in youth soccer, okay, and if those clubs in that league have extra revenue or whatever, they want to bring in private coaching, let them. But they don't have to. It's up to them. Okay, there are some minimal standards for safety and whatever. And all of the identification then moves into that league. You can have scouts that go and look in other places. But again, if you know that all the best players or most of the best players are there, you can now centralize that scouting again. Okay. The player identification side of it into the provincial program is done that way. It's now accessible to everyone. It's affordable to everyone. Anybody who has extra revenue, extra disposable income, they want to hire private coaching, they want to do fitness, let them do it, right? Let them do it. Just don't make
the identification into the high-level pathway, okay, dependent upon you registering and paying for this expensive league.
So what we're talking about here is making it actually accessible.
That's right.
Yep. Cost not inhibited, not inhibitive.
Yeah, not a barrier.
Not a barrier, exactly.
Not prohibitive.
Not prohibitive. Thank you very much. Huh. I mean, we went deep on that. I'm gonna move us on. All right. So here's a framework I want to give parents. In my opinion, there are 4 things that families must compare every time they're looking at a club, a league, development options for their player.
Right.
Parents should compare development, exposure and pathway, total financial cost, and what I'm going to say real life impact. And I'll qualify that by saying time, travel, stress, family,
right,
and health.
Okay.
So tell me, do you agree? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, broadly speaking, I agree. Okay. I think one of the challenges there, so you've sort of introduced, let's call them 4 independent variables, all of which kind of go into like maybe predicting the development or the dependent variable rather, which is success of the player.
Exactly.
Okay? The problem is maybe it's a little bit hard to measure development, okay? But in fact, a lot of conversations I have with parents and players is I'll put it to them a similar way, but just a little bit different. I'll say, you want to go somewhere where you can clearly see that you are improving and that you're improving at the same rate or better than your peers, because technically speaking, anyone who plays and practices will get better than what they were. But if you're improving only by 20% and everyone else is improving by 50%, then you're actually not.
You're not improving.
Technically, you're not improving.
Exactly.
Okay? So that's the thing with development. Exposure. Well, yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, okay, and by the way, I have to say that all of this talk of pathway, even the MLS academies, all of it. Okay. If a player in Ontario has the objective of playing for the provincial team or for, let's say, the TFC Academy in Ontario on the boys' side, okay, they need to be in that player development league because it's corrupted that way, and there's no opportunity to get there if you don't do that. Okay, but if the objective is play professional, most won't, but the good ones have a chance. Or if the objective is to play for Canada at the senior level, okay, whether or not you're in the OPDL has literally zero influence on that. Zero.
Wait a minute.
It's not approaching zero. It's zero.
I gotta stop you. I'm sitting up. So you're telling me that you spend the time, you spend the money, you go through the pathway, you do the whole OPDL thing, you get onto the Ontario provincial team, but it's non-dependent on being part of the Canadian system?
Well, Canada's about to play in a World Cup. Okay, we have quite a mix of players on that team. Okay, with different, some are older, some are younger, whatever. But and you have maybe some that immigrated to Canada later in life, and some that were born here, and it's a mix, right? Okay. By the way, the fact that it's a mix, the fact that you have all of these diverse pathways to the national, that should tell you something. Okay, but in any case, that team. I'll probably do at least a post on this, if not, maybe at some point even some research on it. But in that team, you've got almost all of the players were born within the years where the OPDL existed, because the OPDL started with birth year 2001. We're getting old now, right? So 2001, right? Okay, so there are some older, but quite a lot of them. There's not that many that were born in the 90s. The players born in the 90s are already, they're pushing 30. Okay. So anyway. Which one of those players played in the OPDL and went through that pathway?
I mean, I'm almost afraid to ask the question.
I haven't done a thorough analysis of this. I want to. Okay, so I'll choose my words carefully, but I would be shocked if you have more than 5% of them.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. So, and in fact, TFC Academy is a great example of this, because that's the end result of the youth pathway. That's the highest level that a youth player can get. And of course, from that level, then the youth national teams, they identify almost all of their players from the 3 MLS academies. How's that for selection bias?
So what happens if you don't play there?
You don't play in the youth national team.
What happens if you went abroad?
Good luck until you get to the senior level.
Wow.
Yeah. So in any case, the TFC Academy is a perfect case study. There are far more examples of players that were either in that academy and then got cut because the experts, right, credible, knowledgeable, so-called experienced coaches in the academy didn't think they were good enough. Or, of course, players that were never identified into the academy from the beginning, like never even got a look. There's far more of those who are playing professional soccer now, including a few examples on our current men's national team.
Yes, there are.
Then there are those who stayed in the academy from whenever they were identified as a teenager or whatever, and graduated high school, and graduated literally through the academy and are playing pro now. So you could argue, and again, I'm quite interested in doing research on this. I have to free up some time for it, and maybe talk to my colleagues at the university and see if we can make this happen. But I would argue that not only does playing in the so-called talent and player pathway have zero influence on whether or not you're going to become a professional or play for Canada, I would argue that it's very likely that it has a negative impact on whether or not you're going to play professional or play for Canada. Yeah, I think it hurts players more than it helps them. And again, why do I say that? Because from the beginning, they're being coerced into a system, okay, that Ontario Soccer and the other provincial associations in their provinces take a cut of the revenue from. So they're being coerced into a corrupted system with a financial conflict of interest, and that financial conflict of interest guarantees the fact that they are not getting the highest quality that they could be getting. They're wasting money. It's not that, the OPDL costs $10,000 and the private academies cost zero. No. In fact, if you compare apples to apples, a lot of these private academies, the fees are almost the same. It's that a private academy, remember, it's a business, okay? They eat what they kill. They have to put quality out there.
True.
The gate-kept and corrupt provincial programs don't. So one has a much greater incentive for providing quality, and they get punished if they don't provide quality. The OPDL clubs, they don't have any punishment at all if they don't provide quality. They got their house league, they got their Trillium grants, and they got the coercion.
So
they don't need the money. They don't need the quality.
I'm scratching my head here because if you're a paying parent, you would think that I want my son, I want my daughter to have the opportunity to play at the highest level, whatever that is.
Right.
As a youth, that's playing for their province.
Should be.
Should be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if I want my son, my daughter to play for the province, I have to put them into OPDL, Reg.
Basically, again, they won't use that language when they communicate it publicly. There's propaganda, okay? Because they will say, well, it's, as I said, open to everyone and whatever. But the reality is, and again, I did, comment on this publicly as well, that it's somewhere between 80 to 95% of the provincial
So
teams
there are some
OPDL.
exceptions.
Yeah, but I'm talking 80 to 95%. That's
small.
okay. I can run the stats on that if you want, but this is what we would call statistically insignificant. Okay.
Gotcha.
So you're right. If you want to play for the province as a youth player, you de facto have to be in the OPDL. Yes.
Wow. So, and if I'm there, and yes, again, there was exceptions. It's not every player. Maybe there's 3 or 4 or 5 per roster. I don't know. I'm just asking the questions. But if you're there, what I'm hearing is that the standard of care for the player, the level of potential development may not be as beneficial as what you would find at a standard, or a private academy, or, private development.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even use the qualifier of may not. I would say it's definitely not. Okay? Private academies are not perfect. OPDL clubs are not bad. There's lots of good coaches. Many of them are friends and colleagues of mine that work in both environments. The difference is a private academy is incentivized to put quality. An OPDL club isn't.
Wow.
So you're less likely to get the same level of quality. That's the issue, okay?
Well,
And so back to your idea, even with exposure, okay? Again, if you don't have the gatekeeping and the corruption, well, okay, these, private programs, well, they're a little more incentivized to get the most return on their investment. They are going to build connections with, European coaches and clubs, and you see it, right? I mean, if I had to just ask you, because you're a parent, and I know you're a coach too, and you got 3 kids in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just overall, we don't need to get into like specifics, but which are the programs that you see with more solid and legitimate connections to opportunities in Europe? Private academies or OPDL clubs? Which ones?
I mean, I can speak from my personal opinion.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Because I've coached on both sides, right? I coached in the academies.
I know.
I would say I learned in the academy system, right. And I started my coaching career there, and then moved into the clubs. Right. And I would agree with you in the fact that it is very different on both sides of the fence. Based on my experience, having coached at A&B football, which we both know the coaches there. I would have to say, I'm stumbling because I don't want to tick anybody off, but I would have to say, the private academies, right? It's just, I think about this, right? I'm a football guy. I'm a huge football guy. Anybody that knows me knows. Like, I think about it, and I look at the big clubs, the big youth clubs, and how many players have the youth clubs promoted, or let me take that back. How many players have the youth clubs developed that are currently professional footballers, as compared to how many players private academies, private soccer schools have developed that are now professionals?
And keep in mind that statistic, you don't want to look at the absolute number. You want to do it, kind of per capita.
Yes, exactly.
So of the total number of players that work with the academy, what percentage or whatever, versus of the total in the club, what percentage. And so are you asking me or
if you have the answer, I would love to know, because that's what I wonder.
So I've not studied it. Okay. But, A&B football is just one example of an academy. Sigma is another great example, which is, funny enough, run by another former teammate of ours at York. So we have it's a real small world there at that school. But Bobby's academy, and so like you look at the track record of some of these private academies that never had a house league, that started from scratch, just from coaches that had a few contacts, brought in some players, made teams. They did it themselves, right? Okay. Again, I've not studied it. But the iometer, tells me that the private academies have such a higher success rate that it isn't even close. Wow. And again, I would go back to it's more complicated than this. But at the base level, the most important factor is the fact that a private business has an incentive to put quality out there, and a nonprofit club that's part of a coerced and corrupted system does not. And so, again, we don't have time to talk about it, but maybe that'll be next time.
Part 2.
But like just on the side of, what is the solution? Well, to me, the solution is get the gatekeeping out of the player identification process. Private academies, clubs that want to charge money, let them. I mean, it's fine. You can have some regulations.
Yeah,
a governing body needs to regulate things. You can't just have, the Wild West or whatever. But players who are talented, well, they need to be given a fair shot at being identified. And right now they're not. And by the way, we haven't even talked about iModel.
Yeah, well, I was going to get there next. Right?
Okay, So we need to talk about that.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there because, when we talk about total financial cost, I look at it and I'm saying, okay, iModel, OPDL, you should effectively, if you're in the iModel and you're promoting into OPDL.
Maybe. I mean, So here's the funny thing though. Again, because the system is corrupted, okay, the clubs it's like they have to have OPDL teams. So they're not actually having fair and objective and standardized assessments of players and then determining, okay, well, these ones are good enough for OPDL and these ones that are not, they're iModel. Again, it wasn't perfect back in our day, but you remember how every club had an A team and a B team?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And more or less, the better players were on the A team. Again, you had promotion, relegation, so you had some, systems of accountability there. Well, you don't have that now, okay? So it's very common, especially in these bigger clubs, here we are in Woodbridge, Vaughan, you know, whatever. Like, okay, it's very common that if you were to look at the talent pool that plays in the iModel team, which is supposedly the lower level, and you compare that talent to the talent that plays in the OPDL, which is supposedly the higher level, they're the same.
Yeah.
And in fact, even the results in the tournaments and the showcases, and I'm not watching everything, but again, because now I have, I guess I'm a content creator.
Yeah.
I don't know. Since I've been speaking out, like now, there's so many people send me screenshots of
clips
results.
of
So I'm
results.
kind of seeing all these things, and often the iModel teams, the good ones, will be just as competitive against the OPDL teams. They'll beat them a lot. Sometimes they'll even beat them handily, and then you have all these unsanctioned teams.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
Where did that come from?
Yeah, they're very competitive. So all of that is incontrovertible evidence that you do not have, as Ontario Soccer says, that you do not have all of the best in the OPDL. Because if you did, you wouldn't see any of these discrepancies. No. It would be a rarity that an iModel club would even be competitive with an OPDL club if it truly was the case that the best of the best were in the OPDL. Okay? So just back to the difference between the two, it's clearly not based on talent level of the players. I don't know exactly, but I think one of the things that you get promised with the OPDL, which is you don't get with iModel, is fitness. And so essentially they'll say, well, the standards are very similar, the coaching is very similar, they train similar amount of days per week, all of it. So other than the fact that the competition level is better in the OPDL, which it's
more players,
it's not, but whatever, right? Yeah.
Better players end up there.
So-called better. Okay. The other thing that you get, or you're supposed to get with the OPDL, is the mandatory fitness program. And again, that's my bread and butter, so I'll speak on that because I know it inside out and backwards. The fact that they even say that there's a mandatory fitness program, it is a lie and a scam. As I said, many clubs say that they do it, and then they don't do it. I won't name the name of a club, but believe it or not...
Don't name them. I don't need anybody coming after me.
It's fine, but I mean, it's a long time ago. Okay, there's a club that I found out put my name as their strength and conditioning coach, even though I had no contact with them or the players, and I wasn't aware of it at all. That happened in 2014. Now, they got in trouble for it.
Oh, you would think.
But I'm just saying that happens.
Yeah.
So they lie. Sometimes, again, they tick the box saying they have fitness, and they might bring a yoga instructor once a week. They might bring, again, there's no standard, there's no whatever.
Listen, I like yoga. Yoga's great.
Great, fine, but it's not going to build fitness and it's not going to build professional soccer players, right? It's a recovery tool.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, fitness testing is supposed to be mandatory. You couldn't, like, if you told me, Richard, come up with the most incompetent, invalid, unreliable possible system for collecting fitness and developmental data on youth soccer players. If you told me, come up with that, I would just show you what's happening in the OPDL, and I'd say, just do this. Okay? It's a complete circus from top to bottom. You have some clubs that, they schedule the testing on a day, and then the day comes and it's raining. They cancel the test. They make up fake data, and they lie and they submit fake data. Some clubs are doing that. You have other clubs that, like, one team couldn't make it to the testing day, and they don't have time to retest them, so they give the data on all their teams, and the one club is fake. Okay? They do that. You have no standardization when it comes to any variable or any factor that could influence fitness testing results. For example, weather. Okay? Hot versus cold makes a difference. Turf versus grass makes a difference. Wind makes a difference. I mentioned rain, snow, whatever. What's the only way to standardize it? Well, you do it indoor.
Yes.
They're too cheap to do it indoor.
What are you talking about?
They don't schedule the tests indoor. They schedule tests outside, and they let it happen come as they may. Okay? So there's no standardization. Equipment. Again, I'm in this business. I know, okay? You need electronic timing systems to measure speed accurately, and you need to test and calibrate those systems. They don't do that. They just tell the clubs, test the player's speed over 10 meters. Well, some of them are using a good timing system. Some of them are using stopwatches. And even the timing systems now, there's differences in accuracy and reliability between the systems. Nobody controls for that. There's also something called tester and retester reliability, meaning I don't necessarily run the equipment or standardize the test the same way that you do, that he does, that she does. They're not standardizing that, okay? I mean, I can go on, but basically, as I said, the fact that people are being told that the difference between iModel and OPDL is that in the OPDL, you get fitness. I mean, that couldn't be more of a scam than what it is, because the so-called fitness that you get, the testing is an absolute circus. The data are completely unreliable and invalid. The data is useless that you get from OPDL fitness testing. And on top of it, as I said, the chief technical officer, the director of development, the manager of coach development, all the people that you would expect would have some level of competence and expertise in looking at the fitness testing data, interpreting it, analyzing it, maybe coming up with ways to use it, they're all incompetent too. Nobody knows what to do with the data.
Well, now
and what's the end result, Clyde? Nobody does anything with the data. It's a complete scam. And if that's the only difference between iModel and OPDL, well, the extra fee that you pay for fitness, it's worthless, because you're getting a scam fitness program. It's a scam.
So okay, I'm stumbling here.
Yep.
Hold on.
I know.
Hold on.
Remember, if you're wondering why did I have all these, discussions that led to arguments, that led to me just throwing my hands up in the air and just saying, I can't work with these people. This is why. I've been talking about this stuff privately with people in Ontario soccer and Canada soccer since 2013. That was the first time that I started to have discussions. I gave a presentation at the very first, it was Ontario Soccer Summit. The very first time that we talked about OPDL and fitness testing and all of it, I was the one that gave the presentation. So I've been in it. Again, I don't speak about these things. Yes, I'm not happy with what was done to me. And maybe I have a bit of bias there.
Yeah.
I'll acknowledge that. But I'm telling the truth. Okay? And I lived it and I saw it. It's been, what is it now? 13 years. Nothing has changed.
So let me ask you this, because I have kids in the system today. So my sons, they're going through it, and they do fitness testing every Wednesday or Thursday or whatever it is.
Yeah. Training, right?
Training fitness, yeah. And there are some days they have these tests that today's a day they're going to capture the data. I don't know what I'm learning, because I don't know. What do I know? As I said, I came from the academy side where we fitness was included in what we did, right?
And it was actual.
And it was actual
right, yeah.
on ball. Like, we did fitness, but then we did on ball fitness. It's very different, right? And so we're seeing this now, or I'm seeing this now, and I see them testing certain things.
Yeah.
What happens with this information, that the test data that they're capturing?
Unless the club itself has competent people there that are using it, and I do know some clubs that do, okay? Again, they're not being directed by Canada Soccer or Ontario Soccer to do anything with it, because those people don't even know what to do with it. So unless the club has someone competent that is using it, maybe they're helping to use it to, to track and monitor development, to see whether their, training is working or not. Maybe they need extra, some players need extra fitness. The club,
that's up to the club and the coach.
They can do that on their own.
Yeah.
But outside of that, no one is looking at the data at Ontario Soccer or Canada Soccer. And even if there was someone that was looking at it, okay, which they aren't, but even if there was, they have no idea what to do with it. Okay. And I guarantee you, because as I said, I've talked to the people who are now in charge of the whole thing, they have no clue. We have, in our leadership in soccer, we have the most incompetent leadership out of any country that I've ever been to. I know I didn't mention a lot about my background or whatever, but I've worked in professional soccer here in Canada, and I've worked in other countries as well. And through my research and the conferences I've been to, and colleagues and friends that I have, I've talked to people from dozens of countries, all over Europe, all over South America, even in Africa. Okay, I have never seen the level of incompetence in leadership that we have here in Ontario and in Canada. Everywhere else in the world, the people that are in charge, you might get one or two that are, a friend of a friend, a little bit of nepotism, whatever. But everywhere else in the world, the people that are in charge of coach education are experts, the best coaches in the country. The people that become technical officers, they are the experts. They've been studying it their whole lives. They've worked at the highest levels of the sport, and they have a track record. Our leadership has none of those three. So it is the blind leading the blind. In your club, if the club itself is doing something with the fitness, that's great. They should be, okay? But you're lucky that you have that if you have that. You have no guarantee, whether it's iModel, OPDL, whatever, you have no guarantee that you're going to get any competent use of fitness testing data or any competent fitness training. Nothing. It's a complete scam.
I'm almost afraid to ask the next question because
Don't be.
why is this not mandated and why is it not observed? Like, why are they not keeping track? Like, what's going on here? And like, if someone from Ontario Soccer is listening to this, I hope you reach out because I hope we're wrong. That's all I can say. I hope we're wrong.
I can tell you for sure that I'm not wrong. Okay, so this is what I think. Nobody will acknowledge this publicly, but remember I said the leadership is incompetent. Okay, so the moment that an incompetent leader starts to talk to competent people and ask for advice and solutions, which is what happened to me. I was brought in many times and they said, okay, we're thinking of this. How can we do this? How can we implement better testing and fitness training and all of that? When a competent person starts to give advice, incompetent people, they don't like that because it undermines them and it makes them look bad. Okay? So that leads them to push out all of the competent people and to disregard the competent advice. Okay? So that's the first problem. If we had competent leadership, that would be a start, okay? The second issue, why is it not being implemented, whatever? Well, I mean, then it comes down to kind of the corruption and the costs associated with corruption. Like if you've got this bloated organization with all these, it's a bureaucracy, okay? I mean, I commented on this a few months ago, but imagine that Canada Soccer posted for a full-time manager of people and culture. What the hell is that? Like, who is that person? And if that person is being paid, through the government-funded association, and government-funded means tax dollars. Well, that full-time salary of that person, that's money that could have been used, for example, to rent out the Ontario Soccer Centre for 2-3 weekends a year and run the fitness testing indoor. In a standardized environment. Which, by the way, when we used to do that? In the old Ontario provincial program. We did 3 tests per year, okay? And they were all done indoor. And it was, again, I credit my friend and my colleague, Paolo Paccione. I'll say that because he created the whole thing. I worked there. And I worked, under his direction and his guidance and, okay? But, he and I talked about this for years. And we were like, yeah, it has to be standardized. And not just the indoor location. I was the one that ran all the jump tests. No one else. He was the one that ran the yo-yo test. It was the same person.
So you knew.
So it was standardized. Now, again, it's just a simple example, but these bloated, corrupt organizations, they don't spend money efficiently because they don't have to. It's the same, again, we can go off topic here, but anything that's run by the government is basically guaranteed to be done at a low quality with no standards and no accountability because they don't have to provide standards and they don't have to hold people accountable. So why has this huge gap and this gaping hole in the fitness and physical component of soccer in our province not been addressed? Again, coaches are not taught about it. Testing is a complete scam. There's no standardization for fitness training. Don't even get me started on periodization and load management. That's just a word that they use. No one knows anything what they're talking about that, but they say it. Okay,
I will say.
Even the word development, because there are physical fitness tests, but there's also development. Like, for example, height and weight. Do you know that the OPDL clubs cut out measuring weight of players because they were worried that players would be self-conscious?
What did you just say to me?
I said I was told 3 years ago when I was still working with a couple of clubs before the whole falling out happened. I don't want to work with them anymore, but when I still was, I was told, well, Richard, we're not measuring the weight of these players because we don't want them to be self-conscious.
Rich, anywhere you go in the world, my kids, they've traveled, they've anywhere they go, they measure their height. They measure their weight. They put them through rigorous fitness testing.
Not in Ontario Soccer. No. They're more concerned with ideology than they are with science and actual development. Imagine that. It's a development league. I keep using air quotes. I'm sorry, but that's why I'm moving your mic here. But okay, it's a development league where they don't even track part of the most basic form of physical development, which is body weight. Okay, rather than again forgetting the ideology and just telling coaches, hey, look, okay, do it private. weigh them in kilograms because no one knows what that number even means. Like there are solutions to these things with someone that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's the same reason why, like if I told you, well, okay, you're doing fitness testing, but you don't want people to be made to feel like if they fail the test, like, they're going to get cut, they're going to get punished. But again, a coach that knows what he or she is doing can put those things into perspective.
Yes.
I use an analogy with testing anyway, and I guess I've invented this. I don't know if someone else claims it, but I say it's like looking in a mirror. Mm-hmm. If you pull an all-nighter and you don't do nothing when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror, it doesn't look very good. Yeah. Because it's a reflection of your preparedness versus 8 hours of sleep, exercise, shower, nice clothes, whatever. You look in the mirror, it looks better. Yeah. But it looks better because, again, it's a reflection of your preparedness. Exactly. So it's not better because you're like a better person. Mm-hmm. It's reflecting what you did. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the same. That's what testing is. Yes. Fitness testing is a reflection of your physical preparedness. So if it doesn't look good, well, you're not going to get punished, but you are going to get an extra running program so that the next time we look in the reflection, it looks better. Again, I would treat body weight the same way. But they don't. They're possessed by ideology and they're incompetent. So they just say, well, okay, fine. There's some players, probably some parent complained one day. Why are we measuring body weight? My kid doesn't like that, blah, 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 whatever, right? And so they say, yeah, okay, let's just cut it out. Okay, here's another one. You might remember, because I worked with your kids, right? And that we measured their sitting height. Did you remember seeing that? Yeah. Okay, I don't know if you went into all the detail about that, but when you measure standing height, sitting height, you get an idea of the relationship between the length of the femur, the thigh bone relative to total height. And there's an equation that you can get from that to predict something called age of peak height velocity. Mm-hmm. It's basically the age where they reach the growth spurt. You can do this with youth athletes. I didn't invent it. I learned about it at a conference in Turkey in 2007 because in Europe they were doing it from 25 years ago. Okay, so anyway, this is a way to literally measure and predict the developmental age of players. As you know, teenagers, even though they're all born in the same year, they're not physically the same. Exactly. You have early developers who can benefit from maybe playing up, who can benefit from other types of training. You have late developers who might benefit from being with a younger group, who might need different types of training. Okay, that's development, right? And as I said, if the protocol, the standard protocol, the mandatory fitness testing protocol could just have height, weight, and sitting height, you already have the standing height measurement. You just put them in a chair. It's free. It doesn't cost any time or money. Okay? You can now measure and track physiological development, and now you have a real development league. Mm-hmm. Now, what year do you think it was that I suggested this to the incompetent and corrupt leaders at Ontario Soccer?
2008?
2013, the year that the OPDL was formed. Come on. Yes. Because, again, it's a development league. And, well, here we are. We have this technology. I mean, it's a technology. We have a formula that scientists have developed a little while ago. They're using it all across Europe. You might have heard this term biobanding. That's what it is, basically. That you can, you can measure developmental age. You can start to categorize players based on developmental age. It puts fitness into perspective, right? The early developers shouldn't be held to the same standard as the late ones.
Well, that was like in the academy system. If you were January, February, born early, or you're born late, they kind of separated
even the relative age effect, and that's all born within the same year. Yeah. In fact, the range in developmental age, when you do those tests, it's much greater than that. Most teenage boys teams from, let's say 12, 13, from the time they become a teenager till the time they graduate high school, the range in developmental age is 2 to 3 years. Wow. Which means like they're all 14, but some of them are developmentally like 16 and some are developmentally, behind, and they're all together. So again, the first thing that I was told, I remember literally I was told, oh, Richard, but this is too complicated. They're not going to understand. And again, like I was younger and I was, still maybe a bit naive to think that like, okay, it's a foot in the door. I don't want to challenge these people, whatever. But in my head, when I heard that, I'm thinking, my language here? Like,
yeah, you're fine.
I'm thinking, what the fuck are you talking about? Seriously? It's complicated? What's complicated about it? Developmental age. You don't need to understand how the number is calculated. Just tell the coaches, measure their height in a chair and write it down. No, they didn't do it. And they still don't do it. Yeah. Okay, so it's like all of these things. Why are they not implemented? Because you have an incompetent and corrupt bureaucracy at the top.
Wow. So let me ask you this. you look at, the all of these things that we talked about, the development, the exposure, the pathway, the total financial cost, and, the real life impact of, all these things that we just covered. And we talk about the time and the travel and the stress and, what it does to the family. And let's be real, like the health of the family, is it worth it?
It's a great question. I mean, so I think to answer that question fairly, I would argue that you need to say compared to what? And maybe compared to the alternative. So I want to give one perspective because, and you know my wife very well, and she's a lovely person, and actually she's pretty athletic, but she grew up like she didn't play sports at all. Her parents were really old school. They didn't put her in many sports, and it was very common at the time, especially with girls. And so she had this perspective of like a childhood and adolescence and everything without sports. And obviously I had the exact opposite of that. Yeah. And I made my whole career in it. And so sometimes we even, we have little kind of conflicts about
dinner table talks.
Yeah, a little bit about that. Yeah, and the interesting thing is that, in fact, believe it or not, there are lots of times that I look back because I talked to her, and they had a cottage, they would go on the long weekends. And, they did all this like normal, like family stuff. I call it, literally, I call it normal family stuff. That looks like the
normal family stuff.
I didn't do that.
Neither did I.
I didn't have, right? Every weekend was a tournament, every weekend. And of course I went straight from that to, university soccer, which is the same, right? And then I literally went straight from that into coaching where it was exactly the same. I didn't even have so there's a part of me that's like, I missed out on that.
Yeah.
Okay. And even though back in our day, still club soccer it wasn't the amount of traveling that they're doing now. It wasn't right. It was, and there was, still the season, there was a break, there was indoor soccer. We played lots of other sports.
Multi-sport.
That's an interesting topic too, but I wasn't really good at any other sport. I was decent at basketball. I was a good runner, but in my high school, I did every sport I could. I even tried water polo because I thought I could win athlete of the year if I played it. And I was a shitty swimmer, but I just did it. So it's like we had a little bit of a mix there, whereas now they don't. And now, again, the traveling and all that, it's worse. So I definitely see that there's a positive side. And I know you mentioned family and work-life balance and all that. And so there's a positive side not to be so obsessed with and consumed with the sports schedules. But on the other hand, and she says this to me too sometimes, and I think like, okay, so what is it that does attract people to competitive sports at its base level? Okay, this is what I would say. It is an antidote to almost all of the problems that teenagers get themselves into.
I so agree.
Okay? And so, because I think about it, and like, I'm not going to give details, but it's like, here and there's a few things that I did as a teenager I probably shouldn't have done.
Yeah, okay? Of course.
But I had to sleep on the weekends because I had to get up early on Sunday morning and play. You know what I mean? I had to be healthy. I had to be fit. There's a limit to how much partying or whatever you can do.
Exactly.
Okay, you can't get in trouble. You got to keep your grades up because there was still this thing. I was trying to get a scholarship and then preparing for the SAT, and so the athletes, it's different now, but they still have these things that they're preparing for.
They're holding themselves to higher expectations.
They have to. And so it's like, okay, what's the alternative? Well, back in our day, probably the alternative as a teenager would have been, wasting all your time hanging out at Tim Hortons and I don't know, man, racing cars or like
I think a bit of both of those.
On computer games and Nintendo, this and that, whatever, right? Okay. Now, it's cell phones, iPads, and then you can go down a rabbit hole with all that stuff, right? So and it's not like the teenagers that play the sports are immune to those things. Like we got into it and we did those things, but you have it's an antidote, it's a buffer against that, right? So like. And I would argue that the competitive side of the sport is the only way, because you can't be playing like house league soccer in like the 8th or 9th grade. It's not serious anyway. Yeah. Nobody cares. Yeah. Right. And a lot of the school sports have kind of become that way. They're just participatory, which is fine. But like if you're not competitive, then what's the drive to maintain your fitness? What's the drive to not smoke or drink or like it isn't there. So I think you have to balance the two. So you said, is it worth it? Okay, so I still think that getting involved in a competitive sport for youth athletes is worth it, regardless of the likelihood of getting any financial benefit from it in the long run. And that includes scholarship, partial or full. That includes professional contract, that includes any of it. Because I still think that the benefits of participating in the sport outside of the financial outweigh the costs.
Agreed.
And the benefits are discipline. I know we played on York together, so you know, like, I mean, okay, you had to keep your grades at a minimum level because you would literally get kicked off the team if you didn't.
Exactly, yeah.
Again, you had to train every day. And that's not just keeping yourself healthy to do it. It's the health benefit from doing it. Like, we don't realize it now, you know, but it's like, it was 2 hours a day of high intensity aerobic exercise every day. And then again, in our day, they didn't really have the strength and conditioning. I mean, I lifted weights because I was into it, but now they have, you know, if you play on your university team, you're going to get a mandatory strength and conditioning program all year, right? The ability to manage your time. I've lost track of how many times like anytime I talk to a parent or player and they tell me, yeah, I'm not sure if I want him to keep going. I want him to focus on school, blah, blah, blah. And I always say the same thing. I say, if you want him to focus on school, then keep him in the sport at the highest level possible.
Exactly.
Okay? Because they are not spending day and night studying. They are spending time on it. I get that. But they're also spending several hours a day on their phone.
Yeah.
And the antidote to that is the soccer or the other sport.
Exactly.
Along with the health benefits of exercise, physical and mental. We didn't talk about that, but again,
the outlet that you need.
The exercise, it gives you an outlet. It keeps your hormones regulated. It keeps, you know, it lets you sleep better at night and all of it. And then, you know, there's the teamwork, there's the camaraderie. Like, here we are, you know what I mean? We maintain a friendship. And
exactly.
Now we're on a podcast together, and, you know, and your kids come train with me. Like, there's all these things, like, you know, you make business connections. In fact, I would say, I'm, to the extent that I am successful in business, all of it came from like people I played with, people I played against, or coaches I played for that you know, they helped me, and they, you know, and then that happens in any other business
as
too.
With me,
you know, they probably become your first clients.
Yeah.
You know, and so all of those benefits, to me, they outweigh the cost. Is it worth it? Yes, it is.